Here we go. We're going to try it. All right. This is going to be the first uncolored, really video podcast. I've done some other stuff. Kind of good. I don't know. But this is where I think I finally figured out what the idea is. So we're going with it. Let me see. Are you recording? You're recording. Sometimes I'll be recording and not really be recording. And so it seems as though there's a very specific reason why things happen the way they do. And I was able to sort of sketch it out in this thing I call the big idea. And that's really what this whole Uncolored podcast is about. It's me trying to explore this idea. I haven't totally figured it all out. However, what I've learned so far seems to explain lots of things that I haven't heard explained quite the same way. Now, I by no stretch of the imagination want anybody to think that I've got some original idea, because I, in fact, think that there are no new ideas. They're just a couple of ideas, and we keep kind of rehashing them, renaming them, rebranding them. But it seems as though in society we continue to do the same things, fight the exact same battles. And for all the talk of us being an evolved society, when you really study history, you find out that we're fighting over the same things we've always been fighting over, and nothing's really changed. I think King Solomon, whether apocryphal or real, can rest in his grave knowing that he was 100% right when he said there's nothing new under the sun. And it seems there's absolutely nothing new. No matter how much people tell you that we've progressed and we have a new society and all these things, it's all a load of crap. It seems to me that everything distills into one of two ideas. And that's why I call it the big idea. So the first idea goes like this. There's a creator of everything. Everything that has been created, this agency is responsible not only for creating it, but is responsible for sustaining it at every moment that it exists. That's basically the first idea. It gets far more detailed than that, but who could listen to me for that long? The second idea, much easier. The second idea basically says that the first idea is false. That's it. You can think of it this way. You're either going north or you're not going north. Anything that isn't north isn't north. That's kind of how this big idea goes. Either the first idea is true, that there's a creator of everything, and that creator is responsible not only for our existence, but keeping everything in existence at every moment, or that idea simply isn't true. And it seems to me that every other idea, I don't care what it is, political, social, religious, educational, everything else will find its source in one of those two ideas. Now, I've got to explain that down the road. This is very abstract. So to make it concrete, I want to give you an example. And the example that I have is the Declaration of Independence. So if I can, in my attempt to make this somehow relatable, I think you would be surprised at the number of people who have never read this document. And I include myself. I'd never read it until I began this research. And what came out was that the founders of the country also understood the big idea. Not the way that I've explained it. The whole founding of the country was based on the idea that I just laid out. And so let me read to you what it says. Some of the key points. I'm not going to read the whole thing. So I'm going to read just some key points. And I think that they illustrate the first idea. So this is from an article. I'll put it, I'll link it to it from some, online publication that does these things. But here's what the article says. It starts out by saying, talking about the Declaration of Independence. And the whole point of the article was, why is it in the Declaration of Independence, there's a lot of talk about God, but when you get to the Constitution, there's absolutely no talk about God at all. And when you read the article, it explains why. But I specifically want to focus on the Declaration of Independence. So as it opens up, it gets to this point where it says, the resulting Declaration of Independence, drafted by Thomas Jefferson and edited by his fellow delegates, contains a theory of rights that depends on a supreme being, not man, for its validity. Now, what does this mean? What they're saying is, whatever determines my value, my humanity, this idea that I have a free will, that I have rights, all of these things that I think generally we all agree we all have. We're always screaming about, equal rights and human rights and the value of human life. Well, what the framers of this, the writers of this Declaration of Independence, what they're basically saying is if the first idea isn't true, if there is not some creator that has endowed us with all of these things, or at least is not the source of all of these things that we think are true, free will, human rights, love, morality, then they cannot exist. Now, they don't say that, but that's the implication. Because if these things do not come from the creator, as they say, then where do they come from? On what do you base the fact that you think you have free will or the right to whatever? What would be the foundation for that? Because all you're left with now is some government. And we know that never works out well when we let governments determine who's a human being and who's not a human being. That always goes bad. We know it's not good for a government to determine what our rights are or the extent of our free will in our own domain. What the founders of the Declaration of Independence, the founders of the country in the Declaration of Independence were saying, I believe, was that your humanity and everything that makes you valuable comes from the Creator. And if there is no Creator, then there's really no foundation for it at all. Now, I know that's a big claim, and it's not an original one. Many philosophers have made this claim before me. I just don't think that people really understand the ramifications of this idea, or the ramifications that if this idea isn't true, what that really means. So in further episodes, if you can stay awake, I'll dig into that. But let's go in. But let me read a little bit more. It says all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. I can never say that right. Unalienable rights. Now, what that means is that whatever it is that we think we have, freedom, free will, value as human beings, whatever it is that we suppose we have, that's where they come from. That's the source of those things. The implication being, if they are not, then it's up to somebody else to determine that. And you do not want other people telling you what your humanity is if they think you have it at all. Because human beings have crazy ideas about that. And again, as I've said before, history has illustrated what happens when you allow other human beings to try and determine the humanity and the rights of other human beings. It always turns out bad. Always. Now, something important, I think, to illustrate about the Founding Fathers, people will say, some people have said that this is a Christian nation. And I don't think that that's true. The founders don't seem to be, Bible thumpers who are going around on Thursday nights, while you're trying to eat dinner, trying to get you to come to Jesus. That doesn't look like what they were. It seems that, generally speaking, deism seems to be more of how they understood God. And deism, I guess one way to explain it is, it would be like, if you bought a fish tank and you set it up on the counter someplace and put the fish in and put the food in, and then you just go on and do other things. You may knock on the glass or something like that to see what they're doing and maybe pull out a dead fish every once in a while. But you're not really concerned with what's going on in the fish tank moment to moment. It's just something that you got and you leave it to the side. That's kind of what deism is. Deism understands that there's a creator of everything, but the creator is not actively involved in what's going on. We're kind of like a fish tank out there. The point I'm making is this seems to be more of a philosophical argument rather than some, again, religious come to Jesus speech. And I think the argument is 100% sound. It kind of sets up this thing where, when you were a kid, if you had brothers or older brothers or sisters and they're trying to boss you around and you would go and you say, hey, you're not the boss of me. And you'd run and tell mom. That's kind of what this is. What they're saying is that Britain is not the boss of us. And there's a higher authority that we're going to appeal to for what is right and what is wrong. And it's not going to be the British government. That's what they're saying. They're not the boss of me. That's kind of the idea. So the point I'm making is what you have today is a group of people, whether it's the media, Hollywood, politicians, academics. They've gone beyond whatever it is their particular domain of expertise is, right? Actors aren't simply trying to put out the best art anymore. They're trying to tell you how you should behave and how you should think and what is right and what is wrong. Academics are no longer trying to figure out what's the best economic system. They're trying to talk about virtue and what is good and what is right and how to be good people. Politicians are no longer trying to figure out the best way to run a government. They're trying to tell you how you're supposed to behave and what are the extent of your individual rights. And more, what all of these people and more are trying to tell you is your individual rights and your individual liberty is far less important than what the government tells you it is. That's the trend. Now, when I say that's the trend, nothing new. That's where governments always go. Governments always go from more freedom to less freedom as people begin to understand that if you can get enough group of people to say something is right and you can entice politicians by, money or whatever it is and the promise of power, then you can literally vote anything in. It's not a surprise. All of the tragedies of history, slavery, Stalinist Russia, the killing fields, none of those things were anything but predictable. It's what always happens when individual liberty becomes less important than group identity. Whenever group identity becomes more important than individual liberty, it is an inevitable and inexorable march towards totalitarianism and authoritarianism. It always happens the same. And that's why when people say, well, we're an evolved society, I don't think we're evolved at all. Got nice new cell phones, nice new cars, we're streaming TV on our phones now. All those things are great. But when it comes to who we are as human beings, we're exactly in the same place. You have groups of people using whatever means they can to get in control of other groups of people. And the very point of the documentation, and I think the very point of this Declaration of Independence was to say that only God can determine who I am as a human being and what my rights are. And if I want to know what's right and wrong, I need to understand who the author of all of those things, good, bad, right, wrong, humanity, virtue, morality, I need to understand who that person is, who the creator is. I think that's what the idea is here. Whatever makes me an individual and whatever makes me human, whatever gives me my rights, if it doesn't come from God, then there really is no place where it could come from. Now, I understand that's a bold claim, and many great thinkers over the years have not only illustrated, but demonstrated why it's true. And so what I'm going to do is demonstrate why I think that this is true and why I think we're headed in the direction that it seems that we're headed in is because not only people on the left, but people who are conservatives, and I tend to be conservative, but I think many conservatives have either forgotten about or 100% rejected this idea of our rights and our freedoms being not only created or originated by, but literally sustained by an absolute supreme agency. Once you move away from this idea, the chaos that you've seen in history, all throughout history, is not only likely to happen, but it is an inevitability. And that's really I think that's the basis of this big idea. Either the first idea is true or it's not true. And if the first idea is not true, then many of the things that we scream about and fight about and believe are true simply cannot be true if the first idea is not also true.